Hello. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to do the herringbone or cross stitch. If you have ever done embroidery, you may be familiar with the cross stitch. It's also a hand sewing stitch that we use in theater specifically when we want to attach two things, but we want there to be movement between the two pieces of fabric or between the two garments. So you can see that even though these are sewn together, they still move. For instance, if we have a bodice and a skirt, or top and a bottom of two garments that we want to make work as a single garment for any number of reasons. It could be for a quick change reason, or just because we want the garment to look a certain way and want the bodice to stay at a certain spot over the bottom part of the garment. We might use the cross stitch to attach those two pieces. In that case, instead of using all-purpose thread, which is what I've used here today, we would use Muhlenberg thread just to make sure that the seam we've sewn is a little more resilient, as Muhlenberg thread tends to be a little stronger than all-purpose thread. You'll notice that I've given this two names. It is commonly referred to as the cross stitch or as the herringbone. You can use either term. The most important thing you want to remember, well, the first important thing is that this stitch, even though I'm right-handed, I will be starting on the left-hand side of my fabric. I have anchored my thread on the left-hand side of my fabric, and I'll show you why. So the first stitch is going to go on the folded portion of the fabric. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be sewing toward the right, but my needle is always going to be pointed toward the left. This is how we manage to float the two pieces of fabric separately of one another. So I take my needle, I'm going to go down, and I'm going to take a small amount of thread there. Alright, you can see that it has not gone through all of the layers, it has only gone through the top layer of the fold. It can also go through the bottom layer of the fold if you'd like, but it cannot go through the very bottom layer of fabric. Now I'm going to pull that through, and my next stitch will go above the fold, and it is only going through this bottom layer of fabric, the bottommost layer of fabric. And then I will pull that through all the way, and that is how you accomplish the cross in the cross stitch. So again, I'm going to go down below the fold. I'm going to take a bit of thread, or a bit of fabric with my needle. I'm only taking fabric from the folded portion of the fabric. Pull that through. Once I have that complete, I will go back up above the fold only, and I will pull my thread through. Now, just like all of the other stitches, this is tricky because of the way you're holding your hands and the fact that the needle is pointed in the opposite direction that you're actually sewing. So keep that in mind. This is going to take a bit of getting accustomed to. It's a stitch that's a little fussier than the others. It's one that you don't want to do quickly if you can prevent it, because as you can see, we only want to take a very specific portion of the fabric as we're sewing. Okay, so that when you have some stitches and you give it a little tug, you can see that the fabric moves along but is still held exactly where we want it to in place. On the right side of the fabric, you'll see where the thread has come through on the above fold. You'll see that While there are stitches that go down here, right, the lower stitches that only go through the fold, they don't come through the outer edge, the outer right side of the fabric. We only have these little dashes of thread that come through the right side of the fabric when we sew above the fold. This is a stitch that requires quite a bit of thread, so keep in mind that you still want to abide by the arm's length, the forearm's length rule of thread. You don't want to grab a whole bunch of thread because it will get tangled and it will be very frustrating. You think that you'll be saving time, but in fact you'll be fixing your mistakes more than sewing more quickly because you have more thread. And that is the cross stitch or herringbone.